That night in the recording studio, Ace Frehley changed one chord, turned his back, and the band suddenly understood they'd been playing it wrong for 20 years. The studio was Studio B at Electric Lady in New York. March 1982. Late night session. The kind of night when coffee goes cold and styrofoam cups and ashtrays overflow, and nobody notices because the work matters more than comfort. Ace Frehley sat on a stool in the tracking room, his Les Paul across his lap, one foot on the floor, one on the stool's rung. Relaxed? Patient. Waiting. Across the room, 3 session musicians, bass, drums, rhythm guitar, were setting up for what should have been a simple overdub session. A producer named Martin Kellerman stood in the control room doorway, clipboard in hand, checking his watch every 30 seconds like the gesture would somehow speed up the clock. "We've got 3 hours booked," Martin called out. "Let's make them count. Ace, you ready?" Ace nodded once. Didn't speak. Adjusted one tuning peg with careful precision. The bass player, a veteran session guy named Richard who'd played on hundreds of records and liked people to know it, was running through the chord progression, fingers moving automatically across the fretboard with the confidence of someone who'd done this exact pattern 1,000 times before. "Standard blues progression," Richard announced to no one in particular. "IVV. Nothing fancy. Should be a walk in the park." The drummer, Tommy, clicked his sticks together. "What's the tempo?" "Medium," Martin said. 120 BPM. "Keep it tight. Ace, you'll take the lead on the turnaround." "Same as we discussed." Ace said nothing. His fingers moved across his guitar's fretboard, touching strings without playing them, feeling the tension, the readiness. The rhythm guitarist. Younger, maybe 25, hired because he was cheap and eager, leaned toward Richard. "Has he said anything since he got here?" "Ace doesn't talk much," Richard replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The makeup did all the talking and Kiss. Now he just shows up, plays the parts, collects the check?" Ace's expression didn't change. He adjusted his amplifier volume with one hand, eyes on the glowing tubes. Ace didn't defend himself. He never did. "All right, let's run it," Martin said from the control room, his voice crackling through the studio monitors. "Straight through. 4 bars count in, then hit it. Rolling in 3, 2. The tape machine clicked into record. Tommy counted off with his sticks. 4 clicks. Then the progression started. Richard's bass laid down the root notes. Tommy's drums kept solid time. The rhythm guitarist followed the changes automatically, 1, 4, 5, back to 1. The progression that had formed the backbone of rock and roll since before any of them were born. Ace came in on the 3rd bar. His guitar sang, clean, precise, exactly where it should be in the mix. He played the expected notes with effortless fluidity, fingers dancing across the fretboard while his face remained impassive, unreadable. They reached the turnaround. The moment where the progression would cycle back to the beginning. Standard. Predictable. Rehearsed. And then Ace played a different chord. Not the expected 5. Not the predictable dominant 7th. Something else. A chord that shouldn't have existed in that progression, that violated the pattern everyone in the room had internalized, that made the turnaround feel like falling sideways instead of circling back. The bass faltered. Richard's fingers stumbled, losing the root note for half a beat before recovering. Tommy's hi-hat pattern hesitated, thrown by the unexpected harmonic movement. The rhythm guitarist actually stopped playing entirely, his hands frozen on the fretboard, staring at Ace. Ace held the chord. Let it ring. Let it fill the studio with its strange, unsettling beauty. Then he took his hand off the guitar, stood up from the stool, and turned his back to the band. He walked 3 steps toward the corner of the tracking room where his guitar case leaned against the wall. He didn't look back at the other musicians. Didn't explain. Didn't defend the choice. The tape kept rolling. The control room was silent. Martin stood at the console, one hand on the talkback button, mouth open but no words coming out. Richard lowered his bass, the strap sliding down his shoulder. What the hell was that? Ace didn't turn around. He opened his guitar case, reached inside, and pulled out a different set of strings. He stood there, holding them, his back still to the room. Ace? Martin's voice came through the monitors. That wasn't the agreed progression. Silence. Tommy set his drumsticks down carefully on the snare drum. I mean, it sounded different. But the chart says? The chart's wrong, Ace said. His first words in 40 minutes. Quiet. Matter of fact. Not defensive. Not argumentative. Just stating a truth. Richard laughed. That nervous laugh musicians make when they're not sure if someone's joking. The chart's been used on about 50 recordings. Major hits. The progression is standard. It's literally in every blues book ever written. Ace turned around slowly. He looked at Richard with those dark, unreadable eyes. Play it again, he said. Your way. What? The progression. The way you just played it. Do the turnaround the way the chart says. Richard glanced at Tommy, then at the rhythm guitarist, then back at Ace. Okay. He played it. 4 bars leading to the turnaround, then the expected dominant 7th chord cycling back to the root. Textbook. Correct. Exactly what every musician learned in their first week of blues study. Ace listened without expression. When Richard finished, Ace walked back to his stool, sat down, and picked up his Les Paul. Now listen, he said. He played the same 4 bars. But when he reached the turnaround, he played that different chord again, the one that had stopped the session, that had made Richard stumble, that felt like falling sideways. And in the silence that followed, something happened. The chord resolved. Not immediately. Not obviously. But it resolved into the root with a satisfaction that the standard progression had never achieved. It felt like a question finally getting answered after being asked wrong for decades. It felt like coming home by a route no one knew existed. Tommy's mouth opened slightly. The rhythm guitarist leaned forward. Even Richard's defensive posture softened. The standard progression, Ace said, his voice still quiet, still calm, treats the turnaround like a circle. You go around and come back to where you started. But that's not what the song wants. The song wants to fall. Then catch itself. The chord I played lets it fall. He played it again. The fall. The catch. The resolution that felt like relief. I've been hearing it wrong my whole career, Richard said, almost to himself. We've all been playing it wrong. Away from the spotlight, Ace made a choice no one expected. Martin came out of the control room. He crossed the tracking room floor, his clipboard forgotten in the booth, and stood in front of Ace's stool. How long have you known? Martin asked. About the chord? Ace shrugged slightly. Always knew something was off. Couldn't place it for a long time. Then one night, maybe 5 years ago, I was playing alone in a basement somewhere. No one listening. Just me and the guitar. And I heard it. The fall. The catch. Why didn't you say something before? You've played on sessions using that standard progression. Wasn't my place to say. Not my sessions. I was hired to play what was written. And tonight? Ace looked at his guitar, his fingers resting on the strings without pressing them to the fretboard. Tonight I'm not hired. I'm here because you asked me to help make something good. And if we're going to make something good, it has to be right. The room was quiet. Not uncomfortable. Not tense. Just present. 4 musicians and a producer standing in a recording studio at 2 in the morning, understanding that they just witnessed something that couldn't be taught, only discovered. Can you show us? The rhythm guitarist asked. His earlier nervousness was gone, replaced by genuine curiosity. Can you show us how to play it? Subscribe and leave a comment, because some moments only make sense when we remember them together. Ace spent the next 40 minutes teaching them the chord. Not in the way a professor teaches, with theory and jargon and explanations about intervals and voice leading. He taught the way he knew how, by playing it over and over, letting them feel it, letting their hands discover the shape of it on their own instruments. He didn't tell them they'd been wrong. He didn't criticize their decades of muscle memory. He just played the chord and waited for their fingers to find it. Tommy got it first. His hands had less unlearning to do. Drummers live in rhythm, not harmony. He heard the fall and the catch and adjusted his fill accordingly, letting the drums mirror what the guitar was doing. The rhythm guitarist got it next, his young ears still flexible enough to hear past convention. He played the chord tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as it started to feel natural. Richard took longest. His fingers kept wanting to go to the standard dominant seventh, kept trying to play what 50 recordings had burned into his muscle memory. Ace never rushed him. Never showed impatience. Just kept playing the progression, kept demonstrating the fall and the catch, until finally, maybe on the 20th repetition, Richard's fingers found the right shape. When all four of them played it together, bass, drums, both guitars, the turnaround felt inevitable. Like it had always been supposed to sound that way, and they'd all just been playing a rough draft for 20 years. Martin stood in the control room, listening through the monitors, and quietly rewrote the chord chart. They recorded the song 3 more times that night. Each take better than the last. Each turnaround landing with that perfect fall and catch that made the progression feel complete for the first time. When the session ended, sun starting to show through the studio's small, high windows, the musicians packed their instruments in silence. Not awkward silence. Reverent silence. The silence of people who know they've just learned something important. Richard approached Ace as he was latching his guitar case. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said earlier. About the makeup doing the talking." Ace looked at him. "You weren't wrong. The makeup did talk. That was the point. But it was never the only thing that talked." "What did the guitar say?" "Same thing it always says. Truth. When you let it." What followed silenced everyone in the room. 3 weeks later, the track was released as the B-side of a single that barely charted. Radio didn't play it. MTV didn't care. The record label's promotional budget had already been spent elsewhere. But musicians heard it. Session players in Nashville, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, they heard that turnaround and stopped what they were doing. They rewound their tape decks. They played it again. They grabbed their guitars and worked out what Ace had done. Within 6 months, that chord, Ace's chord, the fall and catch chord, started appearing in recordings across genres. Blues songs, rock ballads, even a few country tracks. It spread the way good ideas spread in music, quietly, without announcement, through the language musicians speak with their instruments. Ace never claimed credit. Never mentioned it in interviews. Never said, "I changed the standard blues turnaround." That wasn't his way. But if you knew where to listen, you could hear it. In songs recorded after March 1982. In the turnarounds that fell instead of circled. In the catch that felt like coming home after being lost for 20 years. The session tape from that night still exists. It's not in any official archive. Martin Kellerman kept it in his personal collection, one reel among hundreds, labeled only with a date, and Studio B miscellaneous. But the chord lives on. Not because Ace promoted it. Not because he explained it in clinics or wrote method books. It lives because he played it once, turned his back, and let the truth speak for itself. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Richard still plays sessions. When young guitarists ask him about turnarounds, he tells them about the night in Studio B. About the man who changed one chord and didn't need to explain why. The rhythm guitarist, now a respected producer himself, keeps a photo from that session on his studio wall. It's black and white. Slightly blurred. Ace with his back turned, guitar in hand, 3 musicians frozen mid-realization. Underneath, a handwritten note. Truth doesn't argue. Tommy frames his session notes from that night. The original chord chart with Martin's handwritten correction. He shows it to every drummer who asks him about playing with feel instead of just time. And somewhere, in basements and bedrooms and small studios where nobody's watching, guitarists still discover that chord. They play the standard progression, sense something's missing, and search until their fingers find the fall. Then the catch. Then home. Ace Frehley taught them that much. The guitar does the talking. You just have to listen.